Hey everyone, Card Cafe here, back with some set 3 goodness here to talk about the queen herself, Venus Luquier, returned in all of her glory. This is now the third version of Venus Luquier, and I don't even know how many versions of just Luquier herself that we're on now, but we're never going to complain because it's Venus Luquier and she's our queen and we love her. So here she is. Let's talk about what this deck does now with its upgrades. So keeping the original ride line here. The grade 0 as always is your standard when going second. When rode upon, go ahead and draw a card. But the more important thing about this is that it's a silver thorn, which is important, and it's a grade 0, which can sometimes be important. So we like it for that reason. The grade 1 just says when she is rode upon by a card with Pale Moon for its clan. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, older Vanguard before Overdress was based on clans, and Silver Thorns and Luquier is part of the Pale Moon clan, which is part of Dark States the Nation. And these encounter cards based on older cards are still having that clan tag to them. So that's what it means by a Pale Moon card. These are Pale Moon cards, but most of the rest of Dark States in Overdress is not Pale Moon. But anyway, so when she's rode on by a Pale Moon card, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, put 1 into Soul, and then shuffle. So just simple. Search your top 7, throw something into Soul, which is really good because you have a lot of cards that have 1 go to Soul effects, or just 1 to be called out of Soul when you're doing skills later. So just a great setup card. And then also when she is called out of Soul, you Soul Charge 1. So good, just adding to your Soul also just for that. The random Soul Charge is a little but at least it is adding to your Soul, which is important. And then our grade 2, Lillian, when she's rode upon by a Pale Moon, you Soul Charge 1 and then get to take a card from your Soul and put it back into your hand. So that's a really useful skill, just getting a card into your hand. Usually you're probably putting one of the 2 cold cards you might have Soul Charged off of either Irina or off of Lillian, because that's when you'll be putting like a trigger because of the Soul Charge in, Perfect Guard, whatever. You can just add that right back to your hand. And worst case, if you have all just gas in your Soul, all the pieces that you need, you have nothing else you want to take out of Soul, you can always just take Lillian out of Soul because of her second effect, which just says, if you have a Vanguard with Luquier in its name, she gets plus 5,000 power and plus 5,000 shield. So in your hand, she's a 10k shield. So that's what I'll do, is if I have no other good targets that I want to take out of the Soul for her effect, I'll just take her. Get the free 10k shield. Can't go wrong with that. But now Luquier, Venus Luquier, the new one. What does she do? Well, she's basically just a straight upgrade from the original in Overdress, at least. She's got 3 skills. The verse is a continuous. So long as you have a Silverthorn Dragon Tamer Luquier, so the original Overdress Luquier, in the Soul, during your turn, this unit, as in Venus Luquier, gets 5,000 power. But if your opponent is at grade 3 or greater, your whole front row gets 5,000 power. So it's a great little mini persona ride, especially if you're going second, just immediately right up to grade 3, and then you get a 5,000 power buff to your front row, provided you just have the original Luquier in your Soul, which is very easy to do. You have plenty of ways of getting it there, so you'll almost always have that effect, which is great. But then her second skill is an act once per turn to Energy Blast 3, take a card from your hand and put it into Soul, and then you get to choose any number of grade 3 or less units with different grades from your Soul and call them to Rearguard. So very similar to the original Luquier, but now it's any number. So it has to be different grades though, but you can then just call out a board from your Soul, which is always nice, not calling cards from your hand and being able to keep them. When just using your Soul to build a board has always been a very strong aspect of Pale Moon, and one of the things that the deck really has going for it. So we like that ability to just build a board for free that now doesn't cost Counterblast, that just costs energy, which is also nice. Makes it feel a lot more free. And then finally, her final skill is when she attacks, you put 2 Rearguards to Soul, draw a card, and then Venus Luquier, gets an additional 5,000 power. And if your opponent is at grade 3 or greater, then she gets a crit until the end of the battle. So that's a nice little bonus, similar again to Luquier. But instead of it being an end of turn, go to soul, draw a card. It's now during the battle phase. You get to free up your board, which can be useful. And now she has some built-in crit pressure, which is nice. So the original didn't have. So we like that. Built-in crit pressure is always good, adding more power to herself. So she's always going to be hitting decent numbers. So long as you have the original Luquier and the soul and activate this effect, she'll always be at least 23 with a crit, if not 33 or bigger, depending on boosts. So that's always great. Pretty good card. The best thing about going for her is that she just doesn't cost Counterblast or Soul Blast anymore. So we really like that. Very nicely designed card, I think. Next for the rest of the grade 3s, obviously max Persona Ride copies. You want to be maximizing that power as much as you can, so we run 3. If possible, I probably would run Grail in this deck just to really add to the offensive pressure. And make sure you're really Persona riding. But for as anyone who knows this deck, we have another order that we have to be playing every single turn. So there's no opportunity to play the Grail as your Regalis piece. So unfortunately, we can't do that. So just 3 copies of her for Persona rides, but definitely still 3. Now, as you saw with Venus's skill, we do need to be running the original Luquier. So we are running 1 copy, my nice little shiny FFR that we have here. Now, why are we only running 1 copy of this when Venus Luquier requires her to be in soul for that first skill? Because 9 times out of 10, 8.5 times out of 10, the 1 is enough. That you will be able to see it. You have plenty of ways of getting her out of the drop zone, searching out of the deck. You will find this card most of the time. Will there be occasional games where she will hit the damage zone and feel a little sad? Yes. But even in those situations, you can heal her out. And if you heal her out, then you can just get her right from the drop zone back into soul. And even if you don't, it's not the end of the world. It's just her first skill that relies on having Luquier just to get that 5k buff to the front row, which is nice, but not the end of the world. The rest of the deck and the rest of Venus Luquier's skills still work without having this card. So if you do lose it, it's not the end of the world. And that second copy that you would potentially run is just such a dead card most of the time. You have no other use for it. Yeah, you can be discard fodder, I guess, which is great, but it's not serving any other purpose. It's such a dead card that it really feels like a waste to run it when deck space is already pretty tight. So I just run 1, and it's really almost never an issue. I recommend 1. If you really comfort level want to run 2, you can. I recommend 1. 1 is perfectly fine. Next, we are doing 3 copies of the brand new boy, Showered Applause Dragon. This is a great card. And why we're not running 2 Luquiers, because I want to try to run as many of these as we possibly can, because this card is really good. So its first skill is just that if you have a Vanguard with Pale Moon as its clan, this is regarded as a Pale Moon unit. Just making sure that you have that Pale Moon archetype. So not really anything special about that. However, the next skill is where things really get interesting, which is just auto when it's placed on rearguard. If you have a Vanguard with Pale Moon as its clan, you get to choose any card from your drop zone and put it straight to soul for free. No additional cost, just when it's placed, pick something, anything from your soul. It can be an order, unit, trigger, whatever. Throw it right into your soul, which is great. This is one of the, again, main ways we get OG Luquier into the soul. You just discard her for whatever reason, or if you had to heal her out, you just plop this down, throw it into the soul. And there's no hard ones per turn on that. You can keep like cycling this in and out of the soul, depending on different effects, to put more things from your drop into the soul, which is really important for some other cards too. So just really good synergy with the rest of the deck of just purposely being able to get whatever you want from your drop zone back into the soul and just keep your consistency and your pieces flowing. So we love that. Great skill just for that, but that's not the only thing he does. He also has an additional effect, which is just continuous. During your turn, if any unit was placed from the soul to rear guard, this gets 5,000 power. And then if your opponent's at grade 3, it gets 10k instead. So it's a 20k 3 beater once you're on turn 4 or 3 if you went second. So that's always good. Anything that's just making bigger numbers, again, for free is always a big plus. So 3 copies there. Excellent card. And then rounding out the grade 3s, as I mentioned, we have a very important order that you still have to run max copies of, and that is the Luquier order. This is your multi-attack extender. So what it does, for anyone who doesn't know from the original wave of Luquier support, is that this stuff, first off, you can play this from the soul for a Counterblast 1, which is great. We love that. That's an awesome effect. Another way to greatly synergize with Applause Dragon, you can use Applause Dragon to put this into the soul and then just activate it via the soul for Counterblast 1. And what happens when you do that is you choose one of your rear guards and it gets the red text skill of when your Vanguard attacks, you put it into the soul and then you can choose any unit from your soul. It does not have to be the unit that you chose with the effect and call it back out to rear guard. Now, while it does not have to be the unit that you called, it is almost certainly going to be, because the unit that you are calling back out is almost always going to either be Applause Dragon or another grade 2 that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So this is just your consistent 4 attacks, and how you'll get multi-attack and why you have to be playing this every turn, and so you're not really able to play any of the normal order Regalis piece. Hint, hint, wink, wink on what else we might be running in the Regalis slot. But so 4 copies of this because you have to see it. Once you see one, that's great. You'll usually be able to sustain it from there because you just keep cycling it from the drop zone, but you have to see it, so you still run max copies. Moving on to the grade 2s, let's talk about this crazy promo that came out a while ago. You also need to run max copies of in this deck because this is just a huge consistency buff. Now, what does it do? It's when this card is put into your soul by a card's ability. Does not matter from where or when, just at any point, and this card is put into your soul by a card effect. You bind it, and then you search for any grade 3 card. Does not have to be a unit, can be an order, and just throw it right into your soul, shuffle your deck. So just a huge consistency buff for being able to get essentially your 3 targets, which are the cards we just talked about. You're using this to get these. Your first priority is you get this off first skill. Your next priority is get this. And then finally, you get this. Those are the 3 things you get off of that effect, depending on what you already have and what order you've seen things. So this is just great. This is how you get all of those grade 3 pieces that are essential for your combos and get into your deck, and the fact that it's free, again, just makes it a fantastic card, and that just activates from anywhere at any time. Doesn't matter what phase you're in on your turn. Doesn't matter where you put it. If it was in the drop zone or your hand, doesn't matter. If it was put by a card effect into your soul, it triggers. So 4 of, absolute must. Now, the next main attacker should be shocking nobody, is the Rising Dragon here. This is from the original wave of support, and you're still running 4 of it because it's got 2 really good effects. The first is when it's placed on rear guard, you can take a card from your hand, put it into soul, and draw a card. So great cycle, great way to take pieces that you draw into that you really need to see into your soul, like maybe a Luquier or an Order or Applause Dragon or the promo. And just shove them right into soul and then draw a new card. So you get to cycle out for hopefully another piece or some shield value, whatever you're looking for, just get you another draw. But the reason why this is the best attacker in the deck is the second skill, which is just continuous in the rear guard circle. If you've called 3 or more cards, or 2 or more cards, excuse me, out of your soul to rear guard, it gets 10,000 power. If you've called 4 or more cards from your soul to rear guard, it gets an additional 10,000 power. So it's a 20k beater if you called 2 or more, a 30k beater by itself if you've called 4. Now, you're going to get that second effect always, so long as you play the order. You will always have called at least 3 things from Luquier's effect, Venus Luquier's effect, and then you will have called then a 4th thing out of the soul from the order, giving him the 20k. There's also an additional card we'll talk about in a little bit that can proc this and activate this sooner. So you'll almost always have the full 30k beater that for once is not restricted to your opponent being any sort of grade. That just gets big immediately. So we love that. You just have to be on Luquier. So Really huge effect. This is always what you want in your front row. It's either 2 of these dragons or it's dragon and applause. Just all of the circus dragons. Excellent card. Should be pretty straightforward. Shouldn't have much else to say about that. You run 4 for sure. And then lastly, in the grade 2 slot, we are running the new Regalis Piece, Protection Twin Cast. This is an interesting card that I am liking a lot. So it's a Blitz order. So it allows us to, you know, work with not conflicting with playing this order every turn. What does it do? It's pretty simple. The first is just when you play it from hand, you choose one of your units that is being attacked, and it gets +1000 power till the end of that battle. So essentially, it's a 10k shield. When you play it from hand, great. Goes to drop zone, fantastic. Now, you might think that that's kind of weak on its own, but that's not its only skill. It also has a skill from the drop zone, which is drop when your unit is attacked. You remove this card from the drop zone, choose one of your units, and it gets +5000 power to the end of that battle for each grade of that unit. So, what's really interesting about this card is that you can guard with it, and then it gets 10,000 power, and then you do have to wait. You cannot use those 2 effects back to back. So you gotta play it for the 10k, and then later on in a different turn, you can remove it from the game, and it's at a 15k shield. So it essentially guards for you twice, which is very strong. To have one card be able to guard twice is very good. It does have that delayed restriction to it, but that's not usually a huge deal. And sometimes you even find yourself in situations where you might like discard this for ride line from your hand because the 10k shield is whatever, and then you can still use it as a 15k shield later. So that's huge. We like that a lot. It's got just a good shield value. It's very kind of versatile, the word I'm looking for, in the situation how you want to use this, and just a little extra shield value in this deck especially can go a long way. If you don't have this, you could run Bubble, the Transfer Blitz order, the Regalis Piece, the like 35k one, shield one that also negates 100 million power. That's totally fine. I would run one or the other just to have some extra shield and have the Regalis Piece. I like this one just because it's free. The other one costs a soul, and you can guard with this twice. It might be lower shield than Transfer and doesn't have that over trigger negation, but the guarding twice is nice. So we're playing around with it, and I think it's a good card. Grade 1s. Let's talk about the new ones and probably get some raised eyebrows about this controversial choice. But we are running 3 copies of the brand new generic for Dark States, the really expensive card, and the really good card, Focalor. So this card's interesting. She has 2 effects. The first is just when she's placed onto rear guard from hand, you energy charge 1. So it does have to be from hand, so you're not getting that effect off Luquier's Call from Soul, but you'll can still just throw her down and get an energy, and that's cool. But what we're really running her for is the second effect, which is at the end of the battle that she boosted, if you've Energy Blast 3 this turn, she retires herself, you draw a card. This deck doesn't have a super lot of draw power, so this helps you with that problem and kind of generate some more hand for you, and you can recycle it, right? So like you're always going to Energy Blast 3 because of Venus Luquier. So you'll always activate or boost this, usually like behind Luquier is where I have her. She retires herself after that attack, you draw a card, and then you next turn drop this, put her back into Soul, call her back out. You can then use her to boost again and draw a card. So just you can loop her like that and keep getting draws. So I like her for that effect. Really just to get you the draw power because this deck does not have a lot. And it's probably the deck's main weakness is that you don't have a lot of guard or shield value because you don't have a ton of draw power. Now, I'll just spoil this here. This is what we're running instead of Babetsu. There's no Babetsu here. And I know that's where I'm immediately getting raised eyebrows and losing some of you. Yes, Babetsu is the grade 1 triple rare that Greedon got a while ago, for those who don't know. That's a Counterblast 1. When a rear guard is put to Soul, take a card from your hand, call it to rear guard. So it enables a 5th attack in Luquier outside of the order giving you the 4th attack. Yes, it does give you 5 attacks, but it's less consistent than you think because One is a counterblast, so it makes you susceptible to damage denial. And 2, it requires you to have something in hand before you drive check that you actually want to call. In testing, I found multiple situations where I would have the Betsu, but my hand would be perfect garden triggers. And then it would be like, okay, this is just a waste and a dead card and isn't doing anything for me because I don't want to call any of these cards. So while Betsu can give you 5 attacks, it is not super consistent and it's a little clunky because obviously Betsu wasn't meant for this deck. It was meant for Greedon. So you can run it and it does work some of the time, but it's not going to be all of the time. Whereas this, yes, it's not a 5th attack, but it is consistent card draw. This will always be drawing you a card. You can't get energy starved. They can't try and deny you energy or stop you from using this effect. There's no way to people to interrupt your turn and get rid of this before you can draw. In premium, yes, but not in standard. So I like this a lot better just for the consistency, help with the draw engine to help stay alive. So I like 3 copies of this. If you want to be more aggressive, run Babetsu, go for it. I'm not going to say that's bad. I just find it less consistent and a little clunky, and I prefer the consistency. So that's what I would recommend instead of Babetsu if anyone is looking. But next, probably next best grade 1, honestly, you have in the deck is Jovial Juggler. Why is this card so good? It's really mainly the first effect, which is just continuous in the soul. When a card from your soul is chosen by one of your Vanguard's effects, this can count as a grade 0. So why is that relevant? Well, if you remember, Luquier is choosing cards from the soul that are different grades and calling them out. So without this card, you're restricted to calling like a grade 3, a grade 2, a grade 1, and a grade 0. With the only grade 0 being the grade 0 in the right line, which you can call and occasionally you will call, but this allows you to call this out as the grade 0 instead. So you're calling 2 grade 1s off the skill instead of the Forerunner, which makes better numbers and is also better for her second effect, which is just auto when she's placed on rear guard by the act ability of one of your Vanguards, which is very much just to keep you from abusing it with this. It only works after being called off Luquier's active ability, essentially. You choose another rear guard, put it into soul, choose a card from your soul, call it back out. So this is how you enable getting Rising Dragon the 20k buff early, is you call this off of Luquier, and then you use this, put something else back into your soul, usually Rising Dragon or Applause Dragon, and call them back out, so that they then activate their effect on-place effects again of either putting a card from your drop zone to soul or putting a card from your hand to soul and drawing a card. And you're just getting to activate that again. And then Rising Dragon is the 4 things have been called. He's getting 20k now. So great effect, free again, just except for the cycling a card from your soul, which is not a cost in this deck. That's what you want to be doing. So definitely 4 copies, an essential card for just making your combos better and making your power lines stronger. Speaking of making your power line stronger, we are still running 3 copies of the grade 1 Breathing Dragon. So this card is just good for boosting up your numbers. What he says is when he's placed from soul and rear guard, if you have Vanguard with Luquier in his name, you soul blast 1, and your Vanguard gets the red text skill that all of your front row rear guards get 5,000 extra power until the end of turn. So great little skill just for powering up your rear guards and making them even bigger. So if you're towering this up, you have Venus Luquier giving you 5k buff to the front row. This then gives your rear guards +5. You Persona Road. Now all of a sudden your rear guards are getting an extra 20,000 power on top of their already big power buffs because they're Applause Dragon or Rising Dragon. So they're already getting +10 or +20. So you're talking about a 30 to 40k buff before boost, before triggers, assuming you Persona Ride. So we love that just for getting big, massive numbers. The soul's not really an issue with how much you're just cycling stuff from the drop zone or soul charging off of like Irina or stuff like that. So the soul is not really an issue. You can get away with 3 and you just want to make sure you see it so that you can start doing that. If you have the extra soul, you definitely could do a play with Jovial Juggler. You call Jovial Juggler out. You call them both out, activate this, Soul Blast 5k, use her, put it back, call it back, Soul Blast again, and now all of a sudden you've got 10k additional. So if you want to be cheeky like that, that's something you can do. Great card, 3 copies. And then, last but not least, to the surprise of nobody, it is the perfect guards that they always are. 3 Nation, 1 Sanctitude. Sanctitude is still here. You're still going to want to stop those triple drives and not have to discard a card when you perfect guard if they have the text triple drive, and then also any of those pesky guard restricts from hand to Guardian Circle. This gets around because it's going to the Order Zone, not the Guardian Circle. And the Nation Perfect Guards, as you all know, if you have 1 or less cards in your hand, you don't have to discard for the perfect guard cost. Great. Straightforward, we all know it. Triggers. Again, this should also be a surprise of nobody. A crit. I was considering running a 4th copy of the other trigger, but no, a crit is still a crit. You want to try and kill people as fast as possible in this deck. This is meant to be more aggressive, and so we run a crit just to try and make that happen. And a crit is just a crit. Can't go wrong. We are running draws as the off trigger because, as I mentioned, aside from Postal Lore, there's not a whole lot of draw power. Rising Dragon is just cycling a card. Luquier is technically just cycling a card because you have to put a card from hand to soul for both of their effects. So you're just breaking even in those cases. And so I like to have a little bit extra draw power again, just to try and farm up a little bit of hand. And, I got my very fancy illustrated rare, so I got to show it off. And pretty much all the other Dark States like I run fronts, so I don't really have that opportunity. But yeah, 3 draws. If you want to go to 4, I won't stop you. Heals, kind of a good old classic for me. I'm running 2 generic and then 1 critical heal, 1 restand heal. You got Blame Meyer, you got Varga, you got all the things, but then you got other weird stuff like Shoto Doji and like Raziel that aren't doing any restanding or gaining any crits. So having the generic heals is just good for having 15k shields in a situation. So this is kind of the go-to thing for me right now, is have 1 of each of these still, but keep a couple of generics. It just constantly fluctuates. You see me changing this all the time. It really just depends on the meta that you're in, and even more so than the meta, just your locals, like whatever really your local scene is and what people are playing, do it off of that. And finally, the over trigger. What over trigger are we running? Well, it is finally time, ladies and gentlemen. We are running a new one. We're running the purple over trigger here in Luquier. So why are we running purple in this deck? It is because this is a deck, in this build of this deck, this can really take advantage of the purple. Because I don't have Bubetsu, I'm not calling another card to the open rearguard circle that Venus is always opening up with her on attack, put 2 cards to soul. So I will always have a circle open when Luquier attacks for this to potentially fill. For everyone who doesn't know, the purple over trigger says when it's checked offensively, I take a card from your hand, you get to call it, it gets 10,000 power, and you also get to take a card from your damage zone, put it into your hand. So it's a heal, but not even a better heal, because you get to take a card from your damage zone and just put it right into your hand and then call a card. So I like this because I'm fully able to utilize both effects. I will have a rearguard circle open because of Luquier, so I'll always be able to call something there. And obviously just taking a card from your damage zone and putting it in your hand is always good. It's also in that situation of like, if you damage check this, you can take this and put this into your hand. So I like it in this deck. I only like running it in decks where I know I'll have an open rearguard circle when my Vanguard goes to attack. And this was one that is able to really perfectly take advantage of that. So we run the purple in this deck. If you were running Bubetsu, I would probably run blue or dark states, honestly, just for the constant 3 crit pressure on Luquier. Yeah, honestly, I'd maybe even rate that over the blue OT, just because the Venus Luquier being constantly 3 crit is pretty dangerous. So if you're running Babetsu, I'd probably do that. But otherwise, I like purple for filling up that spot on the rear guard and also healing. So that's what we're doing. And that's it. The deck's fun. It's nothing crazy. I'm not going to sit here as good as Shoto Doji or like the Shiranui or Varga or any of the top decks. But it's fun. It's a fun deck. It's a little pretty combo heavy deck. Things you got to think about. It does require a lot of pieces, but you got a lot of ways of finding those pieces. And when you really get the gears turning and everything is clicking in this deck, it really feels fun to play. So I do highly recommend it. And it's Luquier. You're never not going to enjoy a good Luquier. I need to get a silver rare, but they keep getting snatched up by my locals. Everyone wants them too. I need to get one. So I have to make that a goal. Yeah, if you have questions or comments, definitely put them down below in the comment section. I'm happy to answer any questions and debate the Babetsu choice, as I'm sure I will hear from. But yeah, I hope you guys are having a good rest of your day. Bye.